Welcome to this brief screencast on the JavaScript HTML document object model, also known as the DOM. The document object model is created by the browser from the web page. So the DOM is a tree of objects. So on the left here we have a very small HTML web page. It's got HTML tags, a header tag, and body tag, and some embedded stuff. So the browser creates this DOM, which is a tree of objects, starting with document, and then it has a element HTML, and inside the element HTML you've got a head element. Inside the head element you have a title element. We also have a meta element that's not shown on the graph. In the body we have an H1 element, we have an A. The link element has an attribute href. It also has text. The text elements are actually elements unto themselves. HTML elements can have text. Some HTML elements can have text inside them. The text is not just an attribute of that element, it's actually another node inside of a child node of the element. And the beauty of JavaScript is it can access the DOM and manipulate the DOM. So how do we manipulate the DOM? First we need to find the elements in the DOM. So starting at the document, we can get an element by its ID. So we go and find the unique ID, we get that element, so it returns a single element, or undefined if that ID is not defined, or there is no element with that ID. We can get elements by tag name, so we can say I want all the P's, the paragraphs, I want all the divs, I want all, and that returns an array of the items that match that tag. We can do it by class name, so we, in the example here, we get element by class name btn, so we're going to get all the bootstrap buttons. We can also use the query selector all, where we actually use the CSS style selector. So in the case here, we're going to get all the paragraphs who have the class intro. And then also we can, given an element, in this case main, we can get an array of all the child nodes. And there are several ways of accessing these things, and that's navigation. So if you say you have an element, you want to know what their parent node is, you just ask for their parent node property. Child node, you give it an array of all the children so you can loop through them or whatever. You can also ask for the first child, the last child, and given an element that is a child, you can ask what its next sibling and previous sibling. So you can traverse through all the siblings of a node or an element, and so this allows you in JavaScript to manipulate or maneuver through the DOM, trying to find the things that you're interested in that you can change or update or modify or reason upon. So how do we add and delete items from the DOM? Well, first, to create one, we actually say document create element, and then we supply the tag that we want to create, and that will create an empty element with that tag. So we did in the first line there, we did var para equals document create element p, so we've created a p tag. We then use the next method is create text element, which creates a text element with the given text. We then append a child, so we add the p tag, we append a text to it, so that's the child of the paragraph. And then we go find one, and then we can append the child for the div, adding the paragraph that we created into the DOM, and it would appear in the DOM. There's remove child, there's replace child, so we can swap things. Insert before actually inserts an item before, the selected item. Again, append child adds a child to an item. So we can manipulate the DOM using these methods. We can change the style of any of the DOM elements. You could use the get elements by tag name, looking for style, and that will actually give you all the style elements. So in the header, let's say you had a style tag, and you can get it with this method. That's a little bit too powerful because you basically get the contents of the style element, which is just text, and so you're gonna have to do some editing of strings and stuff. So that's a little complicated how you would do that. It's not probably the best way to go, but you can. What most people will do is you get document get element by ID or by class, and then you use the style property of that particular element, so that gets the style. If we want to set the style, we could then use style dot and then whatever style we want to adjust. So we style dot color equals red. That sets the text or the text color or the color of that particular element to red. So the text color in there, if it had a text node or all children of that, will have red text. You can change the background color, you can change the width, the height, all this stuff by just assigning to the particular style property that you're interested in. And if that property was not defined for that particular element, this does define that property for this element. So very powerful way to change the style of a DOM element. DOM also supports events, so we could add event handlers to these different events. So the first set is a mouse events, so on click is the event that we will be fired whenever the user clicks on the element. So what we can do is we can define a function called display date, for example. We pass in an ID, which is the actual value, the parameter, the element that we're working on. We set its inner HTML to a new date, and so then in the JavaScript we can say document get element by, and then on click, and we assign the function display date to the on click. So if we have a HTML element whose ID is date, if the user clicks on it, its inner HTML will show the current time. You can use on double click, on mouse enter, so if the mouse enters into an element, you can know when that happens, when it's over or leaves. So you can do things like recolor the thing when the mouse enters, or change the style when it's over. Maybe you can pop up a tooltip or whatever you can do. You get the event, then your function can do whatever it needs to do on that particular item. There's also, you can add these events to the div in the HTML itself. So here we have a div, and we just set the on mouse over event to display date, and then we pass in the ID this, so the stuff would be replaced with the current date and time. Keyboard events, on key down, key press, key up. Form events, you can attach on change, so when the content of the form changes, you'll be given an event. When the user selects the focus into a particular input, you can add an on focus event. On input is when they did something, like selected a value for a selection, typed in a text box or whatever, you would get an event when the user has provided input. On invalid, if that particular input type is validated, and let's say it was an email address, but they didn't have a valid email, you could get an event for that, and then your JavaScript can handle the problem, maybe give them a hint on what the valid values are or something. And on submit, so when they press the submit button, you have a chance to run some JavaScript based upon them pressing the submit button. You can also add event listeners to any element, and so this is very powerful. You can add event listener, you supply the event that you are interested in, and then a function that will be run whenever that event happens. And you can have multiple event listeners for the same event. So you could say add event listener for the click event, and notice that the event name doesn't have the on, so the click is in the HTML you would say on click equals, but when you do the add event listener, you don't use the on, you just say click. So you could say on click display date. You could also say click highlight. So if they click it, you display date and run the highlight function. Again, again, on input, so they make the change to the thing, you can then run your validate function on that particular input. So this is a very, very powerful way to add behavior to the DOM. So if they do something in the DOM, your JavaScript allows your page to be very dynamic. These are very powerful effects. And to access the DOM, you use the document variable. Thank you much for your attention.